that is why someone will ask 5 questions, someone will ask 50 questions, and nobody's answering anything. Because there's really no clash that is happening. The few instances of clash, I feel like, are being overly politicized.
It's a question of your personal motivation. What are you fighting for your family? Are you fighting for your friends? Are you fighting for your children yet unborn? Because if you are doing that, then nobody's flimsy thing is going to sidetrack you from that. Again, this is my personal opinion. I think we greatly overrate the influence of certain people.
So, a very good evening to you. You're welcome to the Ghana This Week show, live on the Shaft podcast. My name is Raphael and I'm your host for today. And this is the first episode of the Ghana This Week podcast. And what we are doing is we'll be discussing trending topics, critical issues, and have a very vivid discussions on how they are happening. It's going to be dropping every week where we give you a summary of major issues that have been happening, political, social issues, and economic issues, on trending issues that affect the average Ghanaian lives. And with me today, as we're starting our first episode, to my left is Frank Bannerman. He says is a social commentator on the show. Frank, how are you doing?
I'm great.
How's your week been so far?
How you're surviving?
You're surviving.
Yes.
That's very interesting. And also our first episode, and in fact, making his debut on the Shaft podcast is Roger Mascot. Roger is a doctor, by the way, and a social political commentator too.
I'm a young man.
Very interesting. So the show promises to be quite fun, educative, and we also prioritize like the opinions. So make sure you subscribe and you like and follow our content on Spotify, YouTube, and also on our social media, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. Let's dive directly to the conversations because there is a lot to unfold. The first one, which is pretty much interesting, is the conversation that is happening between the two leading candidates of this year's election. So we have the current vice president, who is in person of His Excellency, Professor Mr. Mahmoud Bawumia. He's not a professor, sorry about that. Professor of Economics, by the way. Mahmoud Bawumia responding to the questions you have from our opposition leader, that is in person of former President Mahama. So we know Mahama posed out 5 major questions to him. The question was supposed to span through economics, try to question our economics guru what he thinks about the current situation as a response to the current issues happening within the country. And the response we get is a 50 questions response also from the current vice president, which seeks to question whether even when the former president was in power, whether he was able to address certain issues. What do you guys generally think of this back and forth happening between the two major aspirants for the elections? Let me start with you, Bannerman.
All right. So I think no matter what those questions are, it's just not great for democracy. No matter which side you're on, it's just not great for democracy.
Why would you say so?
It's okay. You've asked 5 questions. I've asked 50 questions, and the people who want answers to those questions are just sitting there watching you throw questions around. How does that lead to? Because the whole point of a democracy is that we have conversations, we arrive at what we think is right, we arrive at who we think is not doing well, and then we use that as a way to vote, especially when we are a month away from voting.
Okay.
Throwing questions around does not help our democracy in any way. What I feel like would help our democracy is a debate. But I understand Mahama saying that he doesn't want to debate, considering the fact that like the NPP in the past have also decided that they were not going to debate anyway. So it's just not great for democracy. If they want to answer the questions, they should get in a room and answer the questions and have the debate.
Before I go to Roger, my response to that is, don't you think that the questions they're asking is not just targeted at the opposition person, but they are questions targeted at the general public? So it means that Mahama has asked 5 critical questions. We can answer those questions and assess them based on the performance of the government in the past 8 years. He's also responded with 50 questions. Don't you think we are also the target market since we are the voters?
We are the target market, but it's not different from anything that's been happening on the campaign trail. So on the campaign trail, Mahama keeps saying, what have they done with the economy? Bawumia keeps saying, our economy has been one of the best. Like, it's just, then it's part of anything we do on the campaign trail. Asking specific questions, requiring someone to answer those questions means that we expect them to answer it with the intention that they probably have a better response to it than the average person. because our lived experiences vary.
Okay.
It's like I was watching I think TV3 or GTV the other day, and there was this woman who was selling things on the streets, and she was like, yeah, she doesn't believe that the economy is actually that bad like everybody claims. She just thinks that you should work hard. That is her lived experience. So if we're all answering the questions, we'll have 1,000 different answers for the same question. That is why the person himself needs to answer the question.
I'll get back to you that. But Rich, what do you think of the conversation so far? The question versus question.
Classic case of whataboutism. Someone also raises other questions. No real progress being made because a conversation needs to be had. And because they are the leading two candidates and we live in a de facto duopoly, we need that conversation to happen to our citizens, perhaps to convince us of what side perhaps must be taken, etc. Because progress is not being made. The conversation needs to happen. It can't be pushed aside. Otherwise, then for us, the voters or those exercising our franchise, we are left on divided lines. Everybody's left assuming and all of that. Mm-hmm. So it needs to be had. The whataboutism is not great.
But on the conversation of the debate, as Bannerman said, I think there are questions to the objectivity or who is the person handling the debate. Because the previous debate we had, like one of the most monumental debates we've had in recent time, had the person overseeing it is the current electoral commissioner appointed by the current government. Mm-hmm. The people who sat on the panel, one of them is now a minister under the current government. The other person is a running mate to an opposition member of the party.
Yes.
Do you think that the objectivity or any kind of platform that would give a proximity to objectivity is one that can be had if they want to further the debate?
So, yes, one of them is a minister and an MP as well. But you see, I believe that inherently we all have biases. Mm-hmm. Inherently. Mm-hmm. But that's why there's a structure to things. There's a metric to things. No matter your bias, things can be organized in a way that give everybody a fair platform for a conversation to happen. Mm-hmm. We can never get rid of all our innate biases, but we can provide a structure for which such a conversation can be had on fair grounds for better progress. That's how I see it.
Bannerman.
So this is where I talk about one of the things I hate the most, especially on Twitter, with wear your jersey, right? So the assumption here is that the moment you are critical of somebody, it means that you belong to the opposition party. You see, that's logic. It takes away the idea that you can belong to the opposition party and still make an objective criticism. Mm-hmm. So as he said, we all have our inherent biases. That doesn't mean that we still can't make objective criticisms. It's from the notion of wear your jersey. That is where we get the idea that, the moment you attack a party, the moment you question, so not even attack, the moment you even question a policy, then you must belong to the opposition. It means the opposition cannot make good criticisms. I feel like it's a very problematic narrative that's being spun around right now. And it's very horrible for the democracy going into the future.
The thing about the conversation about wearing your jersey is one I've also always made a claim for, because if you take it back to 2016, when the current opposition was in power, we had a general problem of doomsday. Mm-hmm. And the thing is, we've all agreed it's a problem. Mm-hmm. We didn't care whether it was anybody wearing the blue jersey or a green jersey leading the conversation. Multiple protests happened. In fact, our current finance minister, everybody who is in power now, were leading the conversation of it happening. Mm-hmm. But now that the entire flip it's flipped on everyone, all of a sudden it seems like once you decide to make an objective assessment of a problem, they eventually say you are part of it. Do you think it's something that is good as a conversation now for a democratic state as Ghana?
So, the thing is that it's always about, I feel that all actions are motivated by interest, and perspective. Whenever something switches, when you are in the seat of something, there's a different way you visualize things and how your actions would even go, as opposed to when you are the one also on the receiving end or outside of the actual seat. So it's I feel that conversations, things like this, phenomena like this, are things that okay. It's normal and inherent in human nature. But then again, we need transparency. That's the thing. At the end of the day, we need transparency.
That's fair. But before we go on, on same theme of the topic, another issue that popped up this week and has been coming up is the conversation of the app. And the reason I'm very keen on the app conversation is because, and I would not quote him, but I would take from him, is that as part of the fourth industrial revolution, we need to put ourselves there as a country. So we have Uber, we have Bolt, we have Yango, we have Microsoft, we have all these big tech companies having big valuation, bigger than Ghana when you look at them on a whole contributory scale. So we got our vice president, who is known as the digitalization man, go on an app launching spree. So let's take it back to 2020. We had the COVID tracking app. The COVID tracking app, to be fair, was supposed to track COVID. How it ended up, we don't know what happened with it. Now, in recent time, we've had Citizens app. He's been able to do an app too for the Ghana music industry. And now he's also created a new app, Go Ride app. What do you guys think of it? Because some people are criticizing it, saying that he is not doing the right thing. He's just putting out things that are not addressing the problems of individuals. Other people too are saying that they have a problem that governments are the ones that are leading this conversation. Some people think it's not necessary, it's pretty much redundant, and it's just him doing what would let him win the elections. What do you think, Bannerman?
So, first of all, I'm one of the people who think that the government should be the one creating apps.
Really?
Certain apps may be beneficial to a large extent, like let's say the Citizens app, or because of like trying to get data, centralized and all. And I think that can even exist without us creating like an app of sorts, like because we already have a form of database and all that. Of course, it makes things easier. My problem with governments championing apps is that there's a very nuanced conversation that needs to be had about how huge billion-dollar apps and companies are able to get to where they are. So those kind of companies like Uber, like Bolt, like all those tech companies, one of the reasons why they're able to thrive so much is that a lot of them have the ability to hemorrhage to a large extent. They can invest and lose so much money. And then when they finally become successful, then we value them as $5 billion, $20 billion and all those things, right? Even though some of them, the valuations exist before, and we can get into those technicalities later. The valuations exist before they even make so much impact. The idea is that you have to invest so much and lose so much in the first instance. Secondly, with the Go Ride, for instance, you are literally competing with established ride-hailing apps like Uber, like Bolt, like Yango, and all those things. It's different when it's an individual tech person that is doing this with his own personal money and all those things. Can the state afford to lose so much money? Because there's an opportunity cost that comes with investing so much money into creating an app and making sure it succeeds when you haven't fixed the basics. Like there are no roads. So for instance, and that's the second thing I want to talk about before we go. Like for instance, you say that you want to get ride-hailing apps. Beautiful. What is the state of Ghana? There are hardly street lights. Accra is so dark. Accra Kumasi Road. Usually there are no street lights. There's traffic everywhere. Roads are bad, and there are so many buses that are sitting there that are rotten. We're not doing anything about them. Even our railway system isn't for so many years we haven't been able to fix it and make it work as much as we want to, right? So with all those problems existing, how is the solution a ride-hailing app?
Bannerman, before I go to Roger, I feel like you guys are being unfair to him. Reason being that the government in this part of the world or in Ghana have usually taken charge of most of the things that they deal with, like things that people think should be outsourced to individuals. Governments have literally been the ones that have been doing them. Second thing is, I feel like you guys have been unfair to him, you especially, I don't know what Roger thinks, with miscommunication. He can't say he's building trains. In fact, he gave us a test of what trains should look like. It was the people's problem that the trains were not able to work because obviously saw the whole scandal.
Somebody went to park something.
Exactly. We can have that conversation on people's problem happening. But him doing this is also for him to pitch to them that this is the capacity of what we can handle. Instead of those money to just be sitting idle there, he's creating these apps so that these apps would be able to sort out the problems in real time. So let me give a typical example. And what I'm doing right now is devil's advocacy, but I have to just run it very well so that you get it clearly.
Sure.
So ride-hailing apps are able to pitch the prices of things to sort out there. Like there's competition, but their competition is because they are not owned or have bases in Ghana, they can regulate these things from different angles. We have a Ghanaian ride-hailing app. Because if you look at the kind of percentages these apps take, they are literally absurd. They usually affect the boat users, and most of them don't make enough money. But these apps are Ghanaian made, meaning that most of the interest and percentages these guys would take away from them, these apps are there to solve them. Don't you think that now it would help on the competitive note? Guys, clearly it's devil's advocacy, but try to understand that perspective to whether it's also there.
So,
oh wait, Roger, I think Roger has something to say. Roger, let me hear what you say.
Fundamentally, it is still business. Fundamentally, there still needs to be profit made. Fundamentally, there still needs to be market research. Fundamentally, the business might take certain losses before it becomes valuable. It's still business.
Okay.
And I think the questions that we need to ask are some of what Frank has asked. I don't doubt that the world is becoming more technological by the day and that we need to do that. Okay. It's great if you have long-termism in mind. That's fine. But the problem is that is the foundation stable enough to build on technologically? Are public transport systems perhaps working well enough? Are the roads motorable enough? How is traffic like? Because at the end of the day, you are going to, these same questions that we are asking are going to affect the profitability, which will affect the remuneration that these same drivers that you are trying to save are. And I do agree with you that in our part of the world, perhaps the government has, the social contract is heavy.
Very, very
on
heavy.
this side of the world.
Because
so we do more.
Government is supposed to do with our health. They're supposed to do with our schools. Government is doing free SHS. They are giving us free NHIS. Government is doing free. They are doing all of that. We've had a conversation in the previous podcast. So if government says, in order for it to compete with Mac, we are also giving you the apps you need.
What
is wrong with that?
This is my problem with them now. The current government has been the one privatizing a lot of things. They seem to be the company, they are literally the ones that always want to give entrepreneurs freedom so that they can privatize. A lot of the companies that belong to the states were being privatized by them. How then are you the one who is coming to turn around and be the one who is going to create the app and manage it and regulate it and make sure that we compete with Uber? I don't get the consistency in principle.
Well, Roger, what do you have to say on that too?
The thing is that we need more engagement. I feel like citizens need more. We need to talk about things thoroughly and understand things. Because, yes, otherwise it leaves us in a state of confusion. Because, Charlie, people feel like there's the tendency to feel anger or negative emotions towards things that you might deem unnecessary in the heat of the moment. So if the larger populace, right, feels like, nah, this is not what we need at this time, then a conversation needs to be had. That's what's important. A conversation needs to be had. Because you might have, like I said, you might have the idea, long-termism, you are driving some technological, all of that. But if you don't have the right conversations and gauge the right responses or what the needs are, if you don't do a needs assessment, then your project is not going to be very successful then.
And you see, if I want to be more, try to get into Ralph's mind on this topic more, right? And let's just say that, and this is a conversation I had with someone I really respect, right? And so, as he said, in the heat of the moment, we may not see, we may not see that we may need something as advanced as this, because you're like, but then the roads are bad, but then people are hungry, but then people don't have jobs. Why are you doing this? The thing you can use to justify this is to say that we can't wait. An argument I used for someone, I was like, we can't wait to solve all our problems before we start something new. That's a great argument. Mm-hmm. But you see, even if we make that argument, it still doesn't take away the fact that some of the questions you are asking are so fundamental to the success of this particular ride-hailing app.
Yeah.
You get me?
I get what you mean.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, so, but the guys have said this, but for me, I'm still pitched on we are part of the fourth industrial revolution. And I think the point is people still don't get where his view is coming from. I think he's viewing it from the bigger picture. He's building roads. He's building schools. We cannot finish building all the roads within the period. He wants to get himself involved in it. If we try to view it from that perspective, maybe it's right. I have my own reservations on it, but I just feel like for the conversation, for us to get what this conversation is about, we need to talk about this. Now, another issue that has popped up in recent time is the issue of Galamsey. Now, recent evidence surfacing shows that most of the illegal miners, or the people we think are doing the wrongest of things, all of a sudden, they are well protected. We've seen political actors from both sides of the party trended because they are seen as kingpins and queen mothers of the Galamsey lands, and they are actively present in these things happening. In fact, even some of the people who are going on like campaigns in those regions are letting them understand that we are not going to end it, we are just going to regulate it a little. When you look at all of these kind of things and you look at where the conversation is, do you think there's, in the near future, a possible visible solution to them now that this conversation has become heavily politicized and clearly people are involved that are seemingly untouchable? What do you think about this?
Andrew, wow. See, the thing about certain issues when it comes to a nation is that there are certain things that should never, ever be politicized. You can say that I have this policy, 24-hour economy, work. Other people can say it won't work. Then someone will say, oh, I want to free SHS. Then someone will say it will work, it won't work. When it comes to things that are directly threatening the lives of people, you cannot politicize it. You just cannot. And the reason why I'm saying this is because of what you said, that especially that it has become politicized. The problem with illegal mining, and I'm very happy we have a doctor here with us, is that the way it translates into, and as someone who is heavily in the field of agricultural research, it trickles down into the food you eat, the water you drink, the ability to reclaim lands, because when these lands are poisoned, you have to treat them, and sometimes you may not even be able to reclaim them for years.
I don't think they don't know
right?
the effect. This thing I say is ABC. I think everybody here knows illegal mining.
That's my point. So my point is that like the problem is so dire that you can't afford to make it a political issue. You get it? But then going forward, the problem here is that it goes beyond politics. Anything that people are actively ignoring their health for and others' health, because illegal mining is not always people coming from some other community and then coming to do it in their community. Most of them are from those communities. They are polluting their own waters and destroying their own lands. And I watched a documentary recently on this issue. And the thing is that the people who are there are saying that, see, there are no jobs. We can make money from this. I have been able to feed my family because I do illegal mining. So I'm not stopping. So when someone was like, oh, we are in Accra, we are just doing campaigns and all that, and people there are saying that they will not stop. It's not for the fun of it, because they are just evil and they want to destroy the land and the waters. Some of them are. But like most of them are doing it because they need it as a primary source of income to survive. If that is the case, the solution cannot be a ban of like mining, as some people are claiming that they want. I understand a temporary ban of mining because the kind of solutions we want to those things like regulation, make sure they reclaim the land, make sure they're not polluting water bodies, make sure they're not using mercury and cyanide. For those things to work, you need so much government involvement, so much government regulation for that to work. Okay. So we can't say that, oh, we can regulate it so they can continue doing the mining now. Okay. We don't trust them enough to be able to do it the right way. So we need to ban it temporarily to be able to try to solve the problem before we even say that now small-scale mining should go on. That's my opinion.
So I think the current government has tried to give solutions to it that when they retain power, it's something that they'll be able to sort out. In fact, both parties have been politicizing the whole... they've been politicizing the conversation. For you, Bannerman has given us vividly, he thinks it's something that needs to be banned for a while, but the effect is there. In fact, we all think the effect is there. I was actively, even we were all protesting to make sure that everything was done well. What do you equally think about it?
Just like Bannerman said, there's no an issue that should be politicized, because this affects all of us collectively as a society. The effects are insane, from heavy metal poisoning to farmlands getting destroyed, all of that. Even the dust in the areas that they are doing predisposes people to respiratory illnesses, etc. Wow. But there's a nuanced conversation there that Bannerman teased us that we need to understand. You see, sometimes people make forced choices, And that context is very important, because otherwise, then you vilify people without truly understanding where they are coming from. Because if a hungry man is an angry man, and an angry man is a man with nothing to lose.
That's fair.
You get it? So you can't tell someone who hasn't eaten for like a week that, hey, what you are doing is very wrong, so stop it. So you would think that he would substitute his desires for the greater good. That's a different conversation. But we need to really look at things, in my opinion. We need to ask questions like, what's the staff strength of the regulatory agencies? Are they able to effectively, map out areas and make sure that they are not posing threats to, the relevant water bodies or populations or whatever? We need to have a bigger conversation about regulation. Because like it or not, it is something that will continue for a while. So if it must continue, precautions must be taken so that in the end, the greater good is what we are aimed for. So for me, it's a question of regulation. That's how I see it.
So, getting a segue from this, like, my problem with the regulation thing especially is with the current conversation this week, with people, DCs, being involved in Galamsey. Like, there are accusations of top political people being involved in Galamsey, etc. And I think that's a very good question about whether the regulatory bodies are even well-staffed, are even strong enough, big enough. You can be a good regulatory body, you are strong, then. If there's someone says there's an order from above, like we saw, there was a video, I think I sent that video to you. Like, people from the army are there stopping journalists from videoing illegal mining. How? You get me? So what becomes of your regulatory body when there are people from the army holding guns, sacking journalists? Because one thing we know is that journalists can even go to war-torn zones, and killing a journalist is like a war crime. It's a crime against humanity. You don't attack journalists. But then we have people a journalist is going to video illegal mining. There are soldiers, Ghanaian soldiers with guns, who are stopping journalists from doing that. Then it begs the question, how strong will your regulatory bodies be? Whoever wins, whether it's NPP or NDC, how strong will your regulatory bodies be? How do you remove political elements from the Galamsey operations? How do you assure the Ghanaian populace that you will solve the problem? Because, and that's my problem with the current conversation about Nanado's solution currently was that they've deployed security forces to sack the people and etc. We heard I think in the Ankobra or whatever river recently, the people are back. There are drone activities that show that the people are back there after they were sacked. So again, how do you ensure that you remove political elements? Because if you don't remove the political elements, your regulation is nonsense.
The guys are, just like how the water is like really affecting us, the guys are really, really having effect. And I actually have same thoughts on that. But I think let's go to another conversation that has stepped up after this Galamsey chat, and it's been on social media. It's been trending tremendously. Recent conversations we are seeing are people saying that most of the protests that we have are heavily politically motivated, which we can agree is true to an extent. But now what we realize is that even to the extent that some of the comments that are given are ones that are given or driven based on monetary values that are given to them. So what it means is that some people don't really believe in it, but they are paid for them to talk about these things. Even to the point where the entire online protest has been reduced to a conversation of you were paid to say it, so therefore, does it make it an illegitimate claim? Because my problem with that entire conversation has been, water is bad, corruption is bad, the country is bad. As to whether you were paid to talk about it, as to whether it's a legit problem you're arguing against, if I talk about it, that can be the center of the conversation when that conversation pops up. Do you guys think there is a moral backing, or you think it's something that is bad, or what do you guys equally think of this conversation that has trended so far, Richard?
Protests are good exercises for democracy. I mean, if not to support the French Revolution or anything, but I mean, we literally have a left and a right wing now because of the French Revolution. The things switched up. In the entire world, there was a whole reverberation because of the French Revolution. So protests are good exercises for democracy. However, we need to ask ourselves, what is the goal of a protest? It's change. No matter how you get that change, it's change. So this, I have seen, it seems that this is seeding some sort of apathy in people, which for me shouldn't even be, because it's about focus. If your motivation to do something is stemming from, this person is doing this because of this, then we are not going to get anywhere. There's strength in numbers, regardless of the motives of a section of those numbers. The goal is the goal. Keep pressing till you get there. That is the whole focus of protest.
But Roger, in as much as that's the focus of protest, you see, the thing about evolution is that time and time and again, people always try to find loopholes, especially people who are against. It's not like they're against the protest, but it makes their government look bad. They're always against these things and always try to punch. But this guy is a key figure in it. So key figures, people who are faces of them, are people that you hear conversations around. They take money equally for these things. And I don't know when people feel affected by them, because their influence can influence people to make change. Like when people went for the protest because some celebrity, some influencers said they are going, it makes them feel belonged. It stirred up some anger in them. Those people have the effect of that happening. If you go and find out eventually that these people were also taking money behind, or there are alleged conspiracies that are taking money behind, do you think it's a very justified idea when people feel like, but even these guys, and when you get the amount of money, how it triggers you, like, Kai, so whilst I'm there walking all the way from Okuadjo to Independence Avenue, because I love the country so much, and these guys are getting this amount of money, is it really something worth it?
So first of all, let's remember that all of these are speculations.
Yeah, fair. Speculations.
It's important for us to remember this. But moving on, like I say, it's always a problem of, it's a question of your personal motivation. What are you fighting for your family? Are you fighting for your friends? Are you fighting for your children yet unborn? Because if you are doing that, then nobody's flimsy thing is going to sidetrack you from that. Again, this is my personal opinion. I think we greatly overrate the influence of certain people. You know, social media it's a smoke screen. Likes and retweets can give you the impression that, you know, maybe you are making a difference in the world, maybe you have a certain sphere of influence, but I think that reality on the ground is quite different. It's about focus, personal motivation. Why are you protesting? What are you fighting for? Once you get those questions right and your heart is in the right place, I promise you, even if someone is offered $1 million and it comes to light, and that's the thing, you can never know what is in people's heads until it comes out. So once your head is in the right place, focus is all you need. These conversations shouldn't be happening. Apathy and all that, they shouldn't be happening.
Bannerman.
So let me use a simple illustration, right? So Ralph slaps somebody, right? We all saw Ralph slap somebody, or we heard Ralph slapped somebody. Then Roger comes to pay money, give me money, let's just use $50,000. Roger pays me $50,000 to go and tweet, hey, Ralph actually slapped somebody. How could he do that? That's terrible. I've taken my $50,000. I've tweeted that Ralph slapped somebody. Does that mean that Ralph didn't slap somebody because I took $50,000? So me, I feel like it's a very, sorry to say, dumb way to have conversations. Because this is not like a secret thing. Illegal money is not a secret thing. The effect of Galamsey is not a secret thing. It's something we all see. So if somebody allegedly takes money to talk about it, does that mean all of a sudden the water is not polluted?
But you see, the problem with people who always counter this is that they always shape the narrative and always fuse in a little bit of lies here and there.
But we are not stupid. That's the difference. That is why that cannot fly. Because I'm not a stupid person, so that I'll settle down. Kalijay tweets that, hey, water is being polluted, or go and protest. And because me, I don't have any autonomy whatsoever, I don't know what to do with my life, then I'll just get up. You know what? Kalijay actually said there is pollution. Let's do something about it. I don't think I think it's very insulting to the average Ghanaian that the average Ghanaian just gets up and follows influencers. And exactly what Roger said.
Yeah.
The idea of influencers is largely, overrated. Twitter is a bubble. Social media is a bubble. The real impacts of these things are felt by people. Are you telling me the people who gathered to protest just gathered to protest because Kalijay said so?
Okay. No offense, though, but this is where I come in. You guys can't listen and go off. I don't think their effects are overrated. I think they just have a way of steering people to do what they would have done, but it triggers, it gives them more motivation to do it. So even within for example, and I still always disagree with the idea of social media is just a bubble. I think at this point in time, it is literally becoming a society. What people fail to recognize is that now, looking at the new generation of people that are coming, we are not existing within the interactive spaces anymore where most of the things that we see are quite physical. Everybody now belongs to a certain circle within a certain social media niche. So when I go on my Twitter, there are people who I interact a lot with their tweets. There are people who I see their tweets and I have to engage with them because I see them with a certain light. Their numbers to help. The interaction helps them. I don't think their influence is just an influence of they are there and we are where we are. Their influence has an effect to a large extent. Even if it's not the biggest of extent, their influence triggers and has an effect.
Down.
Even if it trickles out to the average person, but even if it doesn't have a trickle-down effect, the fact that their influence can let a government body respond to these kind of things, because people usually say, Twitter is not the real world. Twitter is not the real world. Or social media is not the real world. But right now, if they decide to say, end bad governance now, and there are over 1 million tweets about it, you can't sit down in your position and say, oh, it is nothing. It's just 1 million tweets. It has an effect on people and how it sees them. So for me, I think I've said this in the previous podcast. I think social media, I can agree with you guys that the kind of effect people think it has, it's not as great as that. But let us also admit that it is a society. But two, the influencers also have an influence, because people always have the motivation of, I want to go for a protest. But what's going to trigger me to do it? Okay, I see 1,000. I see Kalijay. I see Great Man. I see a couple of people tweet about it. And I'm like, okay, on a good day, I wouldn't have gone out. I've probably just tweeted about it. But the fact that people within my society above, my imaginary society are doing that, why not join and go and do that?
Now I have a question for you.
Shoot, you guys.
If on a good day you wouldn't have gone, and it's because of those tweets that you are going, in a way, isn't that a performative protest?
No.
And in that sense, if you do agree to that, in that sense, how would it be different from someone taking money to see what the facts are?
Yeah, very good question. Because you're only doing it because other people are doing it, so you also want to...
No. I think you guys are failing to understand the fundamental context of it. People disagree. I disagree with bad water. I disagree with Galamsey. We all disagree with it. There's a protest that is about to happen. Usually, people have a perception about how they see protests and how they think it is. So people think, hey, if I go, I could get arrested now. Obviously, people are arrested. We can talk about that on a different whole conversation. Or people don't have the urge for them to leave their houses and walk by the roadside and go around with flags. But because we exist within an imaginary society where there are people we see, celebrities, in fact, once again, influencers are our new kind of celebrities, our new niche that we have, because the same way we see people such as Nadia Buhari back then, when all we used to watch was just Hollywood, or the way we used to see Yvonne Nelson, because all we watched was Hollywood, is out now. All we see is our social media influencers. Let me answer his question on the performative part. Me being performative doesn't mean that I still don't believe in the cause. It's just that I've gotten somebody that makes me relate for it to be done. So 2016, if in 2016 Doomsaw was a problem, we all agreed on. We all agreed on Doomsaw being a bad thing. But I wouldn't have gone to protest because I don't have the numbers. I don't know how the whole thing would be like. But there's strength in numbers, as you guys have agreed on. Then Yvonne Nelson, my idol, my Nollywood, okay, not crush anymore, but somebody who I look up to a lot on a different scope, now decides to say she's organizing a protest. I decide to go because of that. Fast forward, it's 2024. It's Kalijay, it is Sheldon, it's these guys. And I decide to do it because of them. It can't be performative. I still believe in the idea.
Okay, so why can't the person who is also getting paid believe in the idea. Why?
Bannerman.
Yes.
Why?
So on that. It's a very good question.
Okay.
And that takes me back to the example of the Doomsaw thing. When the current government was doing a lot of protests because of Doomsaw and all those things, they had a direct interest. The direct interest was that their political party, they want to win political power. They were doing those protests. The fact that they had that interest doesn't mean Doomsaw wasn't true. You get it? Because you were in your room, the lights were off, you knew it was true. So the fact that someone who had an interest was doing that does not mean it was true. It wasn't true. You see, and it's the same way I feel about someone taking, and that's speculative. Even if someone did take the money, right? Like, the fact that someone has an interest doesn't mean that what they are saying is not true. So we really need to decouple that assumption, that logic. I feel like it's a very dangerous thing that we are doing. The moment you are from a political party, nothing you say is true. Nothing you say, you are just cooking. I feel like it's a very dangerous idea for us.
Okay, now let us reverse the switch on the conversation. Now, the same way we've had this conversation on separating individuals when it comes to interest and the conversation, do we think we've been fair to people from the current government when they decide to say the positive things that they've said? Because notice that when I've said all of this, you guys have been able to show how, it's this kind of interest. And look, in fact, this is a podcast, it's a conversation we're having, quite intellectual and giving a different perspective. Do you guys think we have given equal opportunity to government people when they also say same? So when government says, obviously education is bad, it can be sorted out, but we built 30 schools. Roads are bad everywhere, there are no street lights. It's not like government can wake up and say, boom, all roads should be fixed. It's not mailing. But they decide to show you evidence of they've done A, B, C, D, E, F. Don't you guys think it's also equally unfair when they have spokespersons who are also like saying these things and sometimes see the kind of effects of them happen and they say, this is what is happening. Everybody gets angry and say, why would you say so? Why you guys legitimizing what I'm saying? Don't you guys equally think you're being unfair to those people then?
Okay, so before Bannerman even finished, I had this thought. Because I was going to say that if that's the case, then we need to, as a citizenry, extend the same grace to people regardless of political affiliation.
That's fair.
So then again comes my point I made earlier from there needs to be dialogue, an effective dialogue. There needs to be sit downs. Not, there's a difference between communicating and talking. Both parties, citizenry and whoever it is.
Parallel debates.
Yeah, you can be talking, two loudspeakers can be boom, 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 and nothing will happen. Okay. And then you can listen to someone sing a solo. You can also sing another solo. The two of you can do a duet, and you're there. Okay. So you are right. By principle, it should extend to everybody.
Okay.
I just think that the human factor sometimes contributes because Charlie. I come the Obi are stressing 8 years or something. You get it? Yeah. So sometimes their feelings get in the way because they feel like someone is trying to gaslight them.
Exactly.
So they are going to put up a defensive mechanism. So yes, principally we should extend that grace.
And on that, I feel like it also depends on the way the conversation happens. Okay. Right? So for instance, you can you are saying that, but then our roads are bad. A CD is around a dollar is around 16 CDs. Then someone will say that, well, there's free SHS. You see, it doesn't. That is what makes people angry. You can extend the grace, but when I'm talking about A, you're talking about B. That doesn't solve my problem, and that is why someone will ask 5 questions, someone will ask 50 questions, and nobody's answering anything, because there's really no clash that is happening. The few instances of clash, I feel like, are being overly politicized. Let me give you an example. The free SHS conversation. NPP says that free SHS, that is the way to go. NDC says, yes, but your implementation was bad. And for that, they cite so many things, like the fact that people are going to school and then they don't spend a lot of time in school, and there's a lot of chat about contact hours, there's implementation issues when it comes to the track system and all those things. I feel like it's a very good clash One of the few times policy clashes are happening. But you see, my problem is that it's been politicized so much that what we see is a lot of propaganda and a lot of misinformation to an extent where nobody's really trying to listen to solve the problem. It's more about finding fault with someone. And that is why they say that Mahama says he wants to scrap free SHS when he comes. He made an ad. I'm not going to scrap free SHS. You see, it's like it stops being about how are we solving the problem to political points. That's my issue.
Well, once again, that's where I come in again. So when you guys say, oh, it's fair that we extend that grace to them, don't you think that at some point in time, and the reason I'm asking these questions are because we are trying to view this conversation from different perspectives. There's a bigger responsibility on government rather than individuals. Because once you're a government in power, and that's one thing I always say, you are in power. What it means is that anything that happens within that space, you hold a bigger responsibility. You don't have the caveat to be giving people certain responses when you know very well you are fully in charge of everything. So if we now say that, oh, government, why are there no roads everywhere? Your response can't be, obviously I cannot build roads everywhere, but I build roads here. So appreciate these roads that are built here. Because you are responsible to deal with most of this situation. Political communication is part of governance itself. So it means that you shouldn't be able to discredit people for the problems that they have. It means you should find a way of watching it down. What we've realized in recent times are that when these conversations happen, it's quick for people to shift them. So just as you said, the economy is bad, but there is free SHS. There are no waters. Oh, but we've free SHS, agenda 111. Okay, the hospitals are not yet there. Okay, we cannot do all the hospitals now. We started somewhere. You people are being too hasty. Rome wasn't built in a day. We can give you 100 billion codes as to what they're happening. Just as how you guys have said, we should give them that caveat. I also think that you are a government. You are responsible for what happens. Political communication is very, very important for you to just deal with these situations. I think that's just my 2 cents on this conversation. But I actually appreciate the different perspective. It makes us understand what happens. It's just that I still disagree with performative protest. I don't think it works that way.
Oh, it's a conversation. You have to ask the right question.
Yeah, I think just that. Now, the last conversation we would have before we go on another trending topic is what happened in Parliament recent time. I think Bannerman should be able to give us a better context to the conversation that happened in Parliament with the seats that happened. I think it's one that we discussed before it started.
Yeah, so obviously none of the contributions we have is from like a lawyer's perspective, or it's not going to be overly technical. But I think my take on that issue is that I feel like
can you give a context of it first?
Yeah, so
because for me, the reason I'm not explaining the context quite well, and that's the reason about Ghana today. We have information on them, but we are trying to give a user perspective, what everybody generally thinks of it. Right. And for this particular conversation, I know you have a very keen interest in it. I saw your tweet.
Very keen interest.
Wow, okay, bro.
Very keen interest. Because the reason why I have a keen interest is that this is a landmark issue which is going to impact our democracy for a long time to come. And this, so an overview is this. There are 4 MPs in Parliament who are, so 3 from the NPP, 1 from the NDC, who are part of the majority and minority caucuses in Parliament. Okay. But then now they are running as independent candidates in the upcoming election. The problem is that on one hand, you can't say that you are part of a majority, which is the NPP in Parliament, and then outside Parliament, you are actively running against that majority, right? So for the NDC, you can't say that you are part of the minority and then you are running against them in an election, right? The problem is that years ago, in the when Michael Kwe was Speaker of Parliament, there was a similar thing. I think it had to do with the NPP, where an NPP MP had to, the NPP had to take that MP to, call the person out on Parliament to say that you left our party, you're running independent, you can't be part with your party. Exactly. Yeah. And at the time when that happened, the ruling that was made was that that seat should be vacant. Okay. Right? You see, and this is where my opinion comes in, right? NDC, which is now claiming to be majority in Parliament, right, didn't really register an issue with it. And for me, I feel like the reason they didn't do that was because it didn't really affect the power dynamics. But then now that all of a sudden it affects the power dynamics, they are clearly trying to use it to become the majority in Parliament. So that's just the overview. Then the problem became that the majority, I don't know whether to call them former majority. I don't understand the terminology now because of what happened with the journalists. But yeah, the problem now is that the majority sends the issue to court, to the Supreme Court, with the idea that there should be a stay on the ruling of the speaker, and that's something that the Supreme Court upheld. Recently, we saw the issue happen in court, and then it played out how we were expecting it for it to play out. Exactly. Very quickly sat down, and then there was.
I think that's a bit presumptive, but
I know
it happened. We saw it.
Has it happened in the history of Ghana before, where an issue is sent to court?
I think we should let Bannerman.
Yeah.
Because I think the way this issue is, Bannerman is the one that.
Oh, I feel like we should be very. We should deal with how it's played out, and with how it's played out, I feel like, as the Chief Justice said, it's a matter of extreme importance where our parliament is not sitting.
Okay.
So we needed to deal with it immediately. Whether you think other issues are important, well, that's another conversation.
Well.
So now, the conversation now becomes, what would the speaker do? And that is something we'll probably tell you next week after the parliament is.
Yeah, and the reason I'm a bit technical about this conversation is because there are lots of things involved in them. Like it's making me not want to just put myself in it, because once you decide to start stepping in the conversation and you take a side, you'd realize that side A was side B before, but now that it's favoring them, it's becoming a conversation of side A. Then I'm like, what's happening to our democracy, and what does it look like? Does it mean that now it's just a conversation of interest versus what the people are? So it means this whole, I call it a chess game. In this whole chess game, clearly it seems like they are not caring about the fact that Parliament is not being in session for a while now. People are not getting represented. Clearly, it's simply more of who is going to take charge of who is sitting left or right. So you get our parliamentarians matching. I saw all of that, and that's why I'm very.
Before Roger comes in on that, I just want to say that, you see, I agree with the Chief Justice's reasons for saying that we can't just say that those seats are vacant. You see, the reasoning is that these are people who are representing entire communities, millions of people. For you to say that their seats are vacant, it means that they don't get representation whatsoever. What then does that mean for our democracy when you can't have your elected officials represent you? So I think that's a very, very sound reasoning for why those seats shouldn't be vacant. The only problem is that we have had instances where communities have not had representation because the seats were vacant for so long. How come those, well, we know how come it wasn't an issue then, because it didn't affect the power dynamics. So now that it's affecting the power dynamics, all of a sudden we care. But I just feel like it's important for our democracy for us to make to get to these kind of crossroads to resolve these issues.
Roger.
Yeah, there's a landmark case or situation, because it will set the precedent or the tone for many other conversations down the line. Maybe sometime when we have grey beards and all of that. But one thing that stood out for me was, I know a lot of lawyers, and a lot of people were surprised. So I didn't get what that was about. Like Frank said, I'm not a legal person. And like you said, I'm not a legal person, so I can't be technical about this. I like to shy away from matters that I don't have technical expertise in. But almost everything that Frank has said is something that I agree with. Because on one hand, it looks like you are denying residents of constituencies a large number of people representation. And on the other hand, it's like, this is what the rules say and all of that. So let's see how it pans out. These are learned people. Let's see how it pans out.
I think it just begs to question whether truly within this period they are having any effect on things that are happening. Because let's be fair, since they've gone on break, have we really seen any difference? Since elections are coming soon, everybody's concerned about securing their seats. Have people really been active in Parliament, trying to take decisions? And that's the reason why I'm trying to not be so involved in the conversation, because I'll start saying things that it might not be media friendly, but it just questions the state of our legislature. It questions the state of our legislature right now, because in my head I'm looking at it like, if these guys were so active and cared about the people, cared about the politics that they were making of policies, this issue shouldn't be an issue that they can just say, we are going on break for a long time. Or people saying they are boycotting it. And I think we just have to have a whole conversation. I think it's something the Sharp podcast would have. Andrews and Erasmus would expand on that. And I think they've always given their contribution on that. Since this particular parliament has been in session, right from the first day they've been in session, it's been one drama to the other. Apart from the ballots, that whole thing has happened, to even how E-levy was passed, to we've seen boycotting, we've seen... And I think this parliament has been interesting. And I think I made a tweet about, it's one of the... I don't know whether it's regrettable, but it's one of those parliaments where we really would have a lot to learn from.
Someone said, I've forgotten who said this. I don't know whether it's Tintin or Shafiq, one of these people. And they said that, like, in the next election, whoever wins, right, we should have, like, a majority, a resounding majority for one of them, so that we just... Because the hung parliament thing, we all thought, oh, yes, like, it's hung, I'm the best face, so then, we'll get the best of decisions. But actually, what we've seen is so much drama that we don't need. We need the state to be working. It shouldn't be at the expense of us. The state should be working. And with that, we should have a resounding majority. So those who are voting, I don't want to advise you to vote, not to vote skirt and blouse, but we need a resounding majority somewhere so that if someone is trying to do something, we can easily get it done and not have the kind of drama we are having.
Well, if you are voting skirt and blouse again, what I'm saying is that irrespective of what happens, if at some point we realize hung parliament is a thing that would come to stay and mean that they will have to learn how to maneuver their way around. Probably the current opposition that I don't know whether it's the current opposition or government have not been able to know how to master it until when we get that done well. I think it's good because let's be fair, a legislature that has a very hang side makes things more reasonably balanced. But this particular parliament has just shown us that it's a lot of things. And I think let's just end it on that note and wait for how parliament would, whether they would come in next week or not, or let's see how the separation of powers and that whole thing, because lots of themes have been in that conversation. Separation of power, when does the Supreme Court have power over that? How is the Supreme Court so quick in taking decisions? People have given their legal perspective. And the reason we are not putting all that legal perspective is because it involves lots of technicalities. And at this point, average Ghanaians, the kind of problems that we have, and if that technicality is your biggest issue, it's the one that we'll address on the Sharp podcast. I think the past, for an opening episode, this has been very interesting. And to be fair, I'm very happy with the guys around because we've been able to share our thoughts. We've been able to diversify the issues. Once again, always remember, separate the people from the issues. Some opinions that we have here are issue-based. They are not literally one that probably we ascribe to. We just want to make all of these things clear because now we realize that people can understand things differently and that could be a problem. But it's been nice having you guys around. A citizen, as
yes, a young man.
A young man.
Thank you for having me.
Hoping to have you a lot more on the show. And Frank, as usual, the conversations will go on. Guys, subscribe to the Shaft podcast on YouTube and also on Spotify. We are on all social media handles. That's on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter. When you see the video, like and share them. We are here to make sure that the conversations are well diverse and well interesting. My name is Raphael Arthur. I hosted today's Ghana This Week. Obviously, Ghana This Week's show focuses a lot on Ghanaian issues. We want to make sure that we are engaging the masses and we have the diverse opinion. You could always share a comment on our YouTube channels. You could always share your thoughts and just tag us in them, and it's good to go. Once again, my name is Raphael Arthur. I'm your host for today, and have a lovely week. Thank you very much.